I will now invite on stage the panelists for the actual panel powered by AWS, which tackles cloud innovation for the MEA region, Mr. Saeed Balhoul, Director Digital Government Operation Department, TDRA, Bob Titus, CTO Netcracker, Mr. Robin Harwani, Head of Global Telecom Industry Solution, AWS, Mr. Baha Allawati, Vice President Enterprise, Omantel, Mr. Miguel Angel Villalonga, Chief Executive Officer, ETS and Enterprise, Mr. Karim Kalaawi, Chief Cloud Services, ZainTech, and Dr. Ayman ElNashar, Head of Technology Architecture, DUE. And our moderator for this panel, Prabashni Naidoo, Telco Senior Manager Sales, AWS.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to our panel for this afternoon. I'm Prabashni Naidoo, Head of Sales MEA for AWS, and I'd like to take a few minutes to please give each of our panelists an opportunity to introduce themselves. Would you like to kick us off?
Good afternoon, everybody. Pleasure to be with you here. Saeed Balhoul from the TDRA, Director of E-Government Operations.
Thank you.
Hi, everybody. Bob Titus. I'm the CTO with Netcracker. Pleasure to be here today.
Good afternoon. My name is Karim Kalaawi. I look after the cloud business at ZainTech, the technology arm of Zain Group.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Miguel Villalonga. I run IAN Enterprise Cloud, which is one of the businesses in IAN Group, looking after digital infrastructure and customer experience solutions for businesses and government. And as you may say for my accent, I'm from Spain, which means that I would love to answer any question except anything related to football today. But let me tell you something. After yesterday's disaster, I'm going to be cheering for Morocco. So, you know, we are all good friends.
Assalamu alaikum. Good afternoon. Ayman ElNashar. I'm Head of Architecture at DUE. Thank you.
Assalamu alaikum. Good afternoon. My name is Baha Allawati. I'm the Vice President of Enterprise Business Unit at Omantel. I'm also the board member of Oman Data Park, the largest data center provider in Oman.
Hi, everybody. Robin Harwani. I'm responsible for the technology teams in AWS for our global go-to-market and partners within telecommunications IBU. Pleasure to be here. Looking forward to the conversation.
Brilliant. Thank you. So earlier in Bernard's keynote, we heard about the investment from an AWS perspective. I guess to set the scene, it's really important that we take stock of where we are from a region perspective. Saeed, keen to hear your thoughts on that, please.
Yes, I think to address this point, we have to look at the landscape of the infrastructure and cloud here in the UAE. To start with, let's look at the telecom infrastructure. Let's see the data centers, the capabilities, and the availability of power here. So as per the UN Survey 2022, the UAE was ranked 8th in the e-government development index. It was also ranked 9 in the telecom infrastructure index. We are the fastest in terms of rolling 5G. We have the fastest internet by independent surveys. So the infrastructure here is excellent. It's very good. This is all due to the investment which has been put in the industry. In a survey which we have done 2 years back, we looked at the data center industry here. We have, you have probably more than a dozen purposely built data centers. This was 2 years ago. And I'm talking about big buildings, not retrofitted data centers. These are specialized data centers, the ones which hyperscalers really look for. We have in total, more than 12,000 racks within these data centers. We have power of more than 70 megawatt. There is no lack of energy in this country. We have lots of energy, and I think there are good initiatives also with regard to sustainable energy, like Mohammed bin Rashid solar power, and you have also Moro data center, which is supplied through this clean energy. You have seen also in terms of talents, there is lots of changes in the immigration law in order to attract talents abroad. Also, there have been changes in regulations to emphasize on Emiratization and encourage young Emiratis to be part of this ecosystem.
Brilliant. Thank you. Miguel, what are your thoughts on the maturity of cloud adoption in the different parts of the MEA region?
Well, thank you for the question. I think adoption is the big topic. I think that there are two sides of the question. On one side, the business requirement. We always say that every business is becoming a technology business. We were listening to Andrew earlier, how healthcare is becoming a very clear technology business. The same applies to hospitality, transportation, energy. Technology is becoming absolutely critical for every segment in the industry. But on the other side, we have to look at how this technology gets delivered. And cloud, at the end, is a way of adopting new technologies, which is becoming very, very fast and very strong. So it looks like everything is on cloud today. But we are very young as a region in terms of cloud adoption. I had the pleasure and the luxury of becoming part of the initial deployments of hyperscalers in the UAE. Back in 2018, there were no hyperscalers. And when we started talking to hyperscalers about coming to the region, there were a lot of questions being asked that didn't have any answer. Going from regulatory environments in terms of data privacy, infrastructure availability in terms of data centers and connectivity infrastructure. So at the end, it was a very different environment as the one that we have today. So we work hand in hand with hyperscalers to resolve all these issues. So today we work with Prime Minister's office to have the initial steps around data privacy laws. We work with the TDRA to ensure the proper regulation in the country. We work to build the data center infrastructure that we have today, connectivity infrastructure. So today we are in a very different environment, but at the end, the maturity in terms of adoption comes from a combination of different elements. On one side is service availability. Companies need to see services available locally, so they can feel that they can start using these services. This service availability is linked to infrastructure availability. So there has to be an investment in countries. Then a regulatory environment that allows entities to go to the cloud. And then the customer awareness and customer education. The cloud is the solution for the digital transformation questions that they're asking. So I think that this is something that the UAE has been a very good example of. In 4 years, we have really moved into the hub in the region of hyperscale public cloud computing. In the rest of the region, the different countries are moving at different speeds. We're seeing countries like South Africa that started very early. We saw Qatar recently coming up with regions. Saudi is moving at a different speed. But we believe that in a few years, we're going to have all these different elements considered in a way that maturity will evolve. So I think it's still work in progress, but we are moving at the right direction.
Brilliant, thank you. Karim, your thoughts on maturity of cloud adoption?
Sorry, Dib?
Karim, your thoughts on maturity of cloud adoption?
Yeah, thanks for that. Sorry, I didn't catch the question at first. Look, Miguel and I come from a similar background, right? We're coming from the IT industry, and getting into the telco. And one of the things we realized, specifically in the region, in the GCC, there are different levels of maturity. So if you look like in a country like the UAE, which I think was the first country to have, in the GCC, to have local hyperscalers present, you would see that once the hyperscalers came in, there was an acceleration of cloud adoption, which enabled a lot more use cases, a lot more scenarios, and accelerated a lot maturity. We're seeing exactly the same situation now going on in Qatar, right? But let's say with a time lapse of about 3 years. Okay. If you look at the other markets, they are in early phases of maturity, in terms of cloud adoptions for a very simple reason. There's a lot of education that needs to happen on the end user side as well. Not only as a framework, as a regulatory, let's say, implementation in country, but also on the end users. The differences of what cloud brings, the capabilities, the new scenarios that it enables, usually is weighted down by lack of understanding on data sovereignty, privacy, and so on and so forth, plus the fact that the regulatory framework is not mature enough to clearly define an easy path, what should go to cloud and what shouldn't, and this is holding back a lot of the other countries in the Gulf. We are in a unique position as ZainTech, being part of Zain Group. We are present in every single country in the GCC with the exception of Qatar. So we're seeing different levels of adoption, but we're seeing a significant acceleration because of the pandemic that opened up, let's say, the mind to adopting clouds for specific scenarios, even in heavily regulated industries.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for that. Dr. Ayman, from DO's cloud transformation journey, how does the information that we've already heard resonate with where DO is at the moment?
Great. So we have very quite interesting story about cloud transformation. I think we have started in 2017 by a vision that we need to have a consolidated cloud. I mean, consolidated cloud that can serve any workload, either telco or IT or digital, whatever the workload. So we started this journey in 2017 by modernizing our private cloud, by installing a hybrid cloud management platform on top of this cloud. And later we introduced OpenStack Cloud, mainly for the telco workload. And then we introduced a Kubernetes platform to move towards native cloud. Okay, and on top of these three clouds, we have an end-to-end orchestrator that can stitch the surface between the three different clouds. Not only this, and then with the hybrid cloud management platform, we are integrating our private cloud with the hyperscaler, so we can offer on-prem or hybrid or public cloud, either internal or external, for internal customer or external customer. And the next step is taking this to the edge. So we are extending the cloud to the edge, so we can move the content close to the user in the collaboration with also hyperscalers, so we can send the content close to the user, offering an ultra-reliable, low-latency application. So this is a very high-level summary for our cloud transformation journey.
Brilliant, thank you. Baha, if you had the ability to remove the largest obstacle, what would that be from a cloud adoption perspective?
So I would say, if we look at the obstacles, there are a number of obstacles around. You got regional obstacles. It could be actually obstacles that are within the country itself, within the operator itself, or within the customer itself. And each one of them needs to be addressed in a different manner. And good thing out of COVID is actually forced us all to rethink how we actually deal with these obstacles and how we actually deal with the pandemics and the unknowns. One thing where I see one of the biggest obstacles is the data residency, data privacy, and the sovereignty around it. Like what Karim was saying here is different countries are different maturity levels. Different operators are different maturity levels today. So when it comes to cloud, the different bodies within. So you would see within the country, the telco regulator might have a specific framework that has been approved, but then the central bank has not approved, moving to cloud, etc. So unifying the approach across the governance and the policymakers is one key enabler of how we actually overcome these kind of things. The other part comes in is the geopolitical challenges that we have already witnessed within the world. It has forced us to rethink about data. Is it on-prem? Is it hyper model? Is it actually fully cloud, fully public, private, disconnected, connected? It also forced the hyperscalers to rethink about regionalizing things into localizing things. And I think the good thing what I heard today also, what Bernard was mentioning, is the commitment of AWS, and I think all the hyperscalers will have to actually move into that space, committing themselves into the data residencies and the sovereignty that he was referring to, and how we can actually bring and bridge all that together. The second part that we are actually guilty of is us as human beings. Change is always, though it is the eminent thing, but we're always resisting to it. And as engineers, they're always, they would love to see the blinking lights and be next to the heat and feeling those machines, because that's what they are feeling and they're always used to. And how are you going to deal with cloud? How do you actually transform them? How do you build the capabilities around the capacity building? All of those are major components that any organizations would have to actually transform themselves and force themselves into moving into that. The last is when it comes to the customer. The pain of migrating from on-prem to the cloud. Do you have also the right capabilities? Do you have the right people to help you on board? If we are able to unlock these three elements, I believe it sets the path and it will actually accelerate our journey into the, the adoption of cloud faster.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Saeed, on the hypothesis that we are able to overcome all of the obstacles that have been mentioned by the various gentlemen, what do you think would be the opportunities to seize from a cloud adoption perspective?
So, and the TDRA has a digital government sector, which I work in. We are the digital arm of the federal government. Back before 2015, we used to leverage on the private sector cloud service. It was basically infrastructure as service. From 2015 onward, we have built our own sovereign cloud. This was before the hyperscalers come here in the UAE. It was not an easy journey. It was very difficult. But now, if you look, we have more than 6,000 virtual machine or container, and that's a good level of adoption. It's very good. But still, when you look at the hyperscalers and what the ecosystem they offer, that will provide you the agility and the innovation, we are still behind. Now, many people confuse sovereignty with security. When people ask me about is the cloud secured, it's obviously they apply the best security standards. It's very much in a good shape in terms of security. But when we talk about sovereignty, we mean data where the data has been collected and processed. It's subject to the laws of the country. And depending on the data, really, we thought we will decide whether to put these data, process them, and store them in the cloud, or have them in our sovereign cloud. The strategy ahead, what we are thinking is to go, and this is underway, is to have a multi-cloud approach, where our sovereign cloud will be connected to public cloud, and depending on the classification of data and the criticality, we will move some of the services to the cloud, as I said, in order to benefit from the opportunities available at the hyperscalers. In terms of, I want to also mention something. Down the line also, we always think about sustainability. We have it in mind. Mm-hmm. So having cloud-ready applications is very important for us, because once you reach to the stage, you have your applications more optimized, more optimal. They are more efficient. They use less resources. And so this is part of our strategy and where we are going.
Brilliant. Thank you. Miguel, I know that if I had to think about it purely from a South African or an African context, the impact of cultural, regional differences are quite high. What are your thoughts on the impact of regional cultural differences and ideas on how we would leverage those, please?
I think that the difference is more than in culture. I believe that is in maturity. As I was saying earlier, the adoption comes out of a combination of different elements: service availability, infrastructure availability, regulatory environment, and customer awareness. If you talk to a bank, for example, in Africa, or a bank in the UAE, probably they will have the same ambitions and they will have the same objectives, and technology will help them achieving those objectives. The difference between countries is their maturity in all these different elements. And I believe that the real trade-off that has to be created is how strong are the benefits of adopting cloud for the different businesses, as every business becomes a technology business. But on the other side, how each country and each government addresses the concerns, and the concerns in general. The concerns end up being very much around security, and Mr. Saeed was mentioning that there are two elements here. One is security, the other is sovereignty and residency. I think sovereignty and residency is a given, especially now in the world that we live in, where there are geopolitical conflicts. Having the data in country is important, but that doesn't address all the problems in terms of security. And the problems with security, this is where the different elements in terms of maturity, different elements in terms of approach by different countries, and this is a true maturity element, because the problem with security is that the best way to protect is not doing anything, right? So if we don't do anything, then we all go home. We are very secure, but obviously we don't move forward in the digital transformation projects of every industry. So we have to really find that balance, and this is where different countries have approached different approaches in terms of the security elements. And at the end, it's a matter of opening the box of this security concern and understanding what are the requirements. Is the problem the Cloud Act or the Patriot Act, where the countries are concerned that the public clouds are basically American? Or is it a problem in terms of technology being used, protecting the cloud? Is it a problem of who is administering the cloud? So I think that is an exercise which is still pending in many countries. And once that is tackled, and I'm sure that as maturity moves forward and as there's an increased comfort level in using cloud, those elements will be defined and will be addressed. So that is where I see the difference. It's more than cultural. I think that is the maturity specifically around how do we tackle security concerns.
Yeah. Bob, lots of different perspectives being shared. I think the burning question, or one of them rather, is collectively, are we moving in the right direction? Is cloud as successful as we think it is?
My answer is yes. So as Netcracker, we've seen cloud implementations from around the world and how service providers have been leveraging the cloud. And I think the opportunity here in the region is truly to accelerate that. And as I look at the investments that we've made in terms of our OSS and BSS, many years ago we decided that cloud was going to be a major benefit to the industry. So we invested in our cloud-native BSS and OSS technologies. And really, if you look at the three dimensions that we think are important, so digital customer engagement and personalization and associated analytics, network automation and analytics, and new business models, all three of those areas will be benefited by the cloud in terms of elasticity, in terms of new operating models, being more agile, faster, as well as areas such as security and data sovereignty. We think there's benefits in all of those areas, and we're seeing that with our customers. So from our perspective, we've looked at how do you deploy IT systems into the cloud? How do you leverage cloud for networks, whether that be edge services or Open RAN? How do you automate and orchestrate those services across the cloud? And how do you migrate not only applications, but services and customers into the cloud? So that investment, we think that we can bring that to the table and accelerate, in addition to digital transformation, leveraging the cloud to enhance the benefits that we're bringing with our OSS and BSS to that transformation. So we see a real opportunity to leverage cloud even more, and we think it's going to grow exponentially globally. And certainly, we think there's room for a lot of acceleration here in the region.
So I heard you mention investment. Very curious to understand, how do we unlock that investment?
To me, unlocking the investment it comes down to having the right strategy, right? So as you look at your overall transformation strategy, one of the dimensions of that is how you're going to leverage cloud, right? So your overall transformation should be business-led, benefits-driven, and then cloud plays a role in that. So as part of your business case definition, as part of your transformation planning, the cloud aspect needs to be incorporated both from an IT systems perspective, from a network perspective, from an operations perspective, from a data perspective. And once you have that strategy in place, you can start executing against that in alignment with where your business is going.
And maybe leading on from that specifically, Baha, Karim, your opinion on telco-specific requirements to fully leverage cloud in your core network workloads?
Okay, we want to take it over? Or?
Anyone first?
So I'll start with that. So on a telco perspective, one is our systems are based on carrier-grade high availability. We always operate on 5 nines and above, and hence it is mandatory to have systems of such. The redundancy that comes along with it, and not just the redundancy and availability within, but it's also the geo-redundancy. These are some of those, the scalability and the network availability. We run as telco through spikes of traffic shears and during certain times of the period. And so it's important to have the mechanism, and today cloud actually brings that, and specifically with the hyperscalers, to scale up or to scale down as quickly as possible with the limited amount of investment that is needed, and without replicating a lot of that in the infrastructure. The security and the localization of data as telco, you wouldn't see any telco putting everything in their cloud operating from another country. Definitely that would not work, but so localization of cloud to a level would be necessary. Looking at the new technologies, when we look at 5G SA, there is no way that we can operate 5G SA or offer 5G SA without the cloud. It won't work. And the same thing comes in with the latest platforms coming in, the IoT platforms, looking at the Open RAN, edge computing, and so forth. All of those will mandate that we would have the right cloud structure in place. And last but not least, we've invested into a lot of infrastructure. We've invested in the buildings, data centers, and even the people for that matter. So having the right TCO is an important factor for any telco actually to move into the cloud.
Brilliant, thank you. Karim, anything you'd like to add?
Well, we look at it a bit more from the technology side. So going back to what we talked about earlier is when we look at cloud technology specifically in a telco, we look at it on how can it enhance what we're offering to customers, how it can speed up and accelerate new offerings, new use cases, and most importantly, how can it help us do things better? I feel that this is the main driving force when we're looking at cloud technology, like any other technology, and having a real-life application within a telco.
Brilliant, thank you. Robin, you've been super patient, so thank you for that. From your perspective, how do we as AWS work fast with NEPs, ISV, or ecosystem partners to address telco specifics?
Thank you. So from the very beginning, over the last 7 years that I have been engaged with our telecom business, we have had 4 dimensions of how we think about the telecom ecosystem. The very first is our partners. Our partners when it comes to the network equipment providers, our partners within the OSS, BSS space, the partners within the digital space, as well as in the data space. These are partners that form the building blocks for our second dimension, which is the operators that build the value on the connectivity platform together. This is how we have been, over the significant period of time, built a strategy that allows for operators to deliver value. For example, Dish has delivered in a span of 24 months, 7,000 radios nationwide in US. leveraging our partner ecosystem and AWS capability. These 7,000 sites required 40 different partners to work together on the AWS ecosystem, all the way from Nokia's core network to Mavenir's radios, and the OSS systems, the BSS systems, as well as the digital layer that goes around along with the telco lakes. The third dimension is the enterprise customers that consume the connectivity. So once the partner ecosystem has developed the capability to build the platform along with the operator, then comes the consumers of these connectivity layer, both on the consumer end as well as in the B2B space, that are leveraging the connectivity to deliver experiences across verticals. And then the fourth dimension is our own service and product engineering teams that take requirements from all these stakeholders and work backwards to deliver these services. I'll give you a simple example. We did not have, 6 years ago, the capability to distribute 5G edge without extending the AWS cloud to the edge of these 5G networks that were going to be rolled out. And in 2018, we rolled out something called AWS Outposts that take AWS cloud as is to the edge of the network to deploy, like Bernard said, high data, high throughput, low latency networks, right? And you're talking networks that would be deployed across the globe with these edge capabilities that we have launched. I remember distinctly working with Dr. Ayman and Do team when we decided to meet last year and spoke about rolling out a private network, and his requirements were the entire data has to be locally deployed. And we used something called Snow, where we were able to deploy a network with a two-pizza team, as we call a small working team, within a few weeks, a 5G SA network with robotics use cases. So these four dimensions, Prabashni, in my view, the partner ecosystem, the operators, the customers across verticals that work with us as AWS, and finally our service teams and engineering teams that bring together the mechanisms to deliver value.
So keeping with that train of thought, Robin, what is the best practice for a telco operator to, one, access the AWS ecosystem, and two, to actively become builders themselves?
That's a great question again. I think I spoke about this briefly. We take a real customer problem, like what we did in Doo's case. We had 4 weeks, and Alipec was coming in, and we had energy customers talking to us about various use cases, whether it was robotics in mines, in oil rigs, in refineries, or it was use cases related to worker safety and training the workforce using virtual reality. And in 4 weeks, we put together a two-pizza team that took that problem, understood it, and leveraged the strengths across both the teams, along with our partners like Nokia, like Huawei, devices team, Intel, and others, to bring together a solution. I believe taking real-life customer use cases and problems and working backwards from there is the best way to create builders and work at velocity to deliver business outcomes. That's how I have seen them working.
Brilliant, thank you. Bob, from a Netcracker perspective, anything you'd like to add?
Sure. As I look at leveraging the cloud and taking advantage of the benefits, there are 3 areas that I think are important. One is we've made the investments to move OSS and BSS to the cloud, so we've already done the architecture work, working with AWS and other clouds in terms of how that can be deployed in the cloud, how to take advantage of cloud-native software. That work's already been done, so you don't need to reinvent that wheel. Same thing for network service and orchestration. Moving services out to the edge, orchestrating a service across telco infrastructure and cloud infrastructure. We've made the investment on the OSS side to automate that and to give the right controls and intelligence around deploying those services across multiple infrastructures. And then the third area that I think that can be leveraged is just the experience that we have doing this with other operators around the world in the cloud. So whether it's deploying OSS and BSS, whether it's the orchestration, the operational processes around security, encryption, data access, data management. We've worked out a lot of those issues, and we can bring those learnings. So I think that's how you can leverage the ecosystem, the ISVs that work with the cloud to accelerate the cloud adoption and transformation.
Saeed, circling back to something that's been spoken about often today, and more specifically during this panel, the regulatory framework and the impact of it. What are your thoughts around the evolution of the regulatory framework to truly enable cloud innovation and the associated benefits?
So if we speak about the TDRA has done lots of work in order to prepare the environment for the superscalers to come and invest here in the UAE. What I think, things that we need to watch for, as I mentioned, the cloud offers many good things, especially when it comes to orchestration and automation. It's really difficult to replicate in a regional cloud. But what's hindering this concentration is the geopolitical situation that you see. Conflicts are happening, tax, tariffs. This is something we need to probably watch for in the future, that having regional clouds. The clouds like offered by superscalers might have some challenges, as I mentioned, especially when it comes to data sovereignty. But with the proper regulation framework, probably we could come over this.
Thank you. Dr. Ayman, how does an operator such as DO work with AWS jointly to address the challenges and remove barriers, making cloud a pervasive capability that, in this instance, DO could use to its advantage?
Great. So, as I explained, we have adapted a hybrid cloud model, okay, in our strategy. And the use case just explained by Ruben, it was one of the successful use case where we have deployed a full 5G standalone network, including core and access, and even the use case in Atibak in like a few weeks, and actually the integration was less than a week. Considering such agility and such time to market, how we can prepare a use case, we are exploring other use cases as well, such as edge use cases. Today we have an ORAN alliance in Middle East where we are driving the adoption of the ORAN. And I believe AWS can play a critical role here, especially with their EKS, where they can give even the software, the containers platform software to the third party that can be deployed on the edge. So you can host the CU and DU on top of the AWS, and then you can manage the ORAN through AWS. And accordingly, you will offload the cloud management part through AWS. Okay, so this is one of the use cases we are working with AWS on top of it. Other use cases like smart home, where you can use AWS platform to onboard different vendors' use cases for smart home automation. Okay, this is one of the use cases as well we are working with the AWS. So in a nutshell, we have adapted a smart approach for the collaboration with hyperscaler that based on the TCO, we need to validate TCO first, okay? We need to put in mind that we are going toward a native cloud, so we need to select the right workload, building the right TCO, selecting the right workload that we can be hosted on public cloud or hybrid to meet the data obligation, or on the private cloud. So it's based on the workload, we can identify the right platform, and I just give very two examples in the collaboration with AWS.
Okay, thank you. Miguel, we know that there's a joint role to be played between CSPs and telco operators supporting the national and I suppose the cross-regional economic agenda. What do you think that we need to focus on specifically and drive?
Well, I think, again, as Mr. Saeed was mentioning, the investment that has been done in this country, specifically around infrastructure, which is the basic pillar to build cloud solutions, is second to none. I mean, we have a unique position. We are the country with the highest fiber-to-home penetration. We cover every single corner of the country with fiber. We have an amazing data center infrastructure. We have a tremendous international connectivity and subsea cable capacity. We have an amazing coverage in terms of mobile. So I think all this is a reflection of the investment, the long-term investment that the telecom operators have made in the country, and I think that is a testament of how the telecom sector is supporting the government in driving the agenda to become a digital economy and basically to move from an oil-based economy to a knowledge-based economy. It's, I mean, nothing can be built by one entity alone. We need to have an ecosystem of different players developing their services in this environment, but I think that in this stage, the alignment between the telecom operators, infrastructure development, and the national agenda is absolutely clear, and it continues to move in that direction. So I think it has happened over the last decades. It has accelerated over the last few years. The data center, for example, capability that has been created is recent and it's very, very modern. And it will continue as new technologies are coming, 5G is coming, edge computing is developing. All these are building blocks that will ensure that the national agenda continues moving in the direction of, again, becoming a digital-first economy that will leverage different segments beyond the traditional oil economy in the region.
Brilliant. Thank you. Saeed, from a TDRA perspective, is there anything that you'd like to add to that view?
Well, what I can say that the TDRA as a regulator will continue to work closely with the telecom operators in order to make the UAE a better place for digital services that will thrive here and fuel a digital economy and digital services that at the end that will help people. As I mentioned, in many surveys by the UN, the UAE is ranked number 1 regionally and very good ranks globally on a number of indexes, whether it has to be the infrastructure or online services index. And we would like to keep this, and we want to work on this either by investing in infrastructure, telecom, data centers, or supporting our partners as well who came and invested here, as well as working with the other federal governments with regards to building capabilities, talents and capabilities in the UAE.
Brilliant, thank you. Baha, we've spoken about partnerships, we've spoken about innovation. I'm curious to know your thoughts on a CSP growth agenda and the specific role cloud could play in enabling it.
So if we look today at the telco world, the biggest challenge that we're facing is how we actually improve the top lines and how we can maintain or improve the EBITDA levels. Advancement of technologies, competitions comes in, regulation kicks in. All of those puts a lot of pressure on your traditional core services and the traditional revenues that we are generating from those. And hence the look for new revenue streams, diversifications, new partnership models is always on the outlook. As Omantel, we've been looking at how we, and not only Omantel, but I believe a lot of the telcos to transform from being a telco into a techo. Because you're no longer just offering a SIM card or a data connectivity, etc., but you're offering a solution and a subset of ecosystem of services, and cloud is a component of that. Looking at diversifications of cable systems, and I believe Omantel, Salat, and many others also are playing a big role in that, and that itself creating a lot of momentum by bringing hyperscalers on board into the region to serve the region and improve the customer experience, improving the offering, and also diversifications of the revenues. Where we also look at is data monetization. As telcos, we sit on wealth amount of data that is not necessarily being tapped today. So there is a lot of untapped opportunities of which how you can actually link the data all together and be able to customize and personalize the experience down to an individual. Looking at the cloudification and the digital transformations, be it on the government or be it on the large enterprises, they are a lot predominantly are a bit behind in terms of the adoption, and hence these are opportunities where we see the collaboration with the hyperscalers, AWS and others, are key into enabling and unlocking and unleashing the potentials in that space. The adoption of 5G and going into SA or the Open RAN or the edge computing, all of those will mandate us to have the collaboration with the cloud providers on that front. And hence, cloud is always going to be at the core of what we're going to be doing, be it on a private or being on the public. And having the right modelship, whether it being a managed service provider, a professional service provider, or a migration service provider, looking with the likes of AWS or any other hyperscaler will be the key in unleashing the new potentials in the new era.
Right. Dr. Ayman, in a world where growth is often equated to revenue, how do you seek to monetize 5G investments?
Great. So 5G, we have started or launched our 5G services in May 2019. I think we were the first in the region. And it was at that time for consumer. And the 5G came not only for consumer, it came with a promise for a lot of use cases, okay, including mobile broadband, including IoT, ultra-reliable, low-latency use cases. Unfortunately, majority of these cases need a new 5G standalone core. So the 5G in SA launch, we started with 5G in SA. Today we have like 20% penetration of our customer. They enjoy the 5G. And the first, I can see a real monetization use case for the 5G was the launch of the home wireless based on 5G. And the user experience on a 5, of course, it's complementing our fiber story. So we have triple bay over fiber, and then with the 5G home wireless, we just give you a router in your home, and you enjoy again triple bay services, and it's plug and play. Sorry, it's plug and play. So seamless experience, and the experience of the user here, it's exactly similar to the fiber experience, almost similar to the fiber experience. So this is the monetization use cases for the 5G. Other use cases that we are exploring, like private 5G network, as we just explained, edge use cases. And when I talk edge, we are talking about either hosting everything at the customer side or just hosting the control plane at the customer side and the other plane at our data center. This is another use cases. And the introduction of 5G SA that will allow network slicing, will allow a lot of other use cases like ultra-reliable, low-latency use cases. We are very close to launch our 5G standalone as well. But the issue here is how we can migrate the existing 5G NSA customer to 5G SA.
Right, thank you. Miguel, what do you think your end customers require most in the short term from a 5G perspective?
I think I look at it from a slightly different angle. I believe that, again, we live in a country with a 99% fiber-to-home coverage. So I think 5G is a complementary technology, but I'm honestly not too sure how that play in the short-term monetization element. However, I believe that the 5G opportunity comes from basically two angles. One, 5G is a foundation technology that, along with other technologies like edge computing, and I think edge is another very important subject. Once edge reaches maturity, there will be a significant amount of application platforms that will unlock a number of different use cases. So the opportunity comes from the new use cases on one side and the explosion of data on the other side. I think Baha was mentioning that data monetization is important. We're going to have an explosion of data because the access to data is going to be much broader. So again, the consumer side is one angle, but in the business side, I think that there's going to be a significant amount of new use cases that will be unlocked. Some examples, I mean, we deployed in 2020 the first 5G in Expo 2020 site. So we did it for artificial intelligence-enabled video surveillance. So it proved to be very, very good because we had a lot of different points around the campus that were acting on images in real time. So the 5G requirement was there. But I think that we still have to see all the other use cases. Some others could be autonomous driving, industrial IoT and industrial artificial intelligence, but we will see more and more use cases that will be unlocked by the applications that will be deployed thanks to technologies like 5G, IoT, edge computing as a total application environment that will enable all these new use cases. I think still we have to see all those use cases. I think it's a little bit challenging to see that a massive investment of infrastructure has to pay off, and you know, because it's in the consumer side, maybe in the residential part is something that can be justified. In mobile, it's difficult to justify from a consumer point of view because 4G works fine. But I believe that there's going to be a very, very long list of new use cases that will unlock opportunities.
Perfect. Robin, from an AWS perspective and as the resident SME, how would we enable monetization of 5G?
I think that's the fundamental mechanism I've seen for monetization of 5G is effective partnership between the operator and AWS. That's been the way over the last 7 years I've seen the process of monetization of 5G happen. And in my view, and as we see it across the industry business unit, we see transformation of industries as the lever for monetization of 5G. So whether it is industrial segment, it is logistical segment, health, as well as automotive. The work that, for example, we announced at reInvent with BMW, Ducati, and others, transforming how they design these automobiles using virtual reality is a transformational experience. And the way we see the role of AWS in it is our edge ecosystem. And we always talk about ubiquity when we talk about our edge ecosystem. Over the last 6 years, we have launched 15 different edge services that enable our customers at different points of presence, whether it is in-building edge, at the 5G operator edge, at the fiber locations that the operators integrate into, or hybrid, which is operating across a public and private network. Let me give you a simple example, Prabashni, in terms of how we look at transformation of industries. If you go to an Amazon fulfillment center, it's roughly between 1 to 3 million square feet of space. In this 1 to 3 million square feet of space, there is conveyor belts equal to the size of 30 miles in a single building that run different components, the different packages that run across the system in a single Amazon fulfillment center. There is 6,000 plus robots in this fulfillment center on an average that move packages from one part of the center to the others. There is autonomous vehicles in the yard that enable connectivity and mobility of equipment as well as shipment of goods within the Amazon fulfillment center. All of this requires connectivity. And pre-5G, all of this required wired connectivity. That is changing. And we see multiple times the return on investment on these industrial processes, on these logistical processes, when implemented right, using the right edge infrastructure to transform the experiences that the customer get, not just in terms of personalization, but also productivity. And that's how I believe we can monetize 5G.
Okay. Thank you. Dr. Ayman, in your comments earlier, you spoke about cross-pollination of learnings from 5G, perhaps into different industries or different innovative ideas. Please could you share a little bit more on your thoughts around that with us?
So for the deployment of 5G, I think as I said, we started with 5G in SA. So the standard we're in hurry to give technology quickly, and they give a 5G in SA. I see a 5G in SA, it's just an additional LTE layer. maybe additional 10% to 15% in terms of capacity compared to LTE, especially if you deploy it at sub-6 gigahertz band, okay? And then majority of the operator today, maybe 80% of the operator, they already deployed 5G in NSA. Now, we have deployed a new core to support the 5G SA. For 5G in NSA, the only use case that you can monetize is a mobile broadband. Okay, moving those other use cases, you need the 5G SA. So today we have 20%, maybe 1.2 million of our customers, they already on 5G in NSA network. We are deploying a 5G SA, not every handset support the 5G standalone. Then we are, again, into like you are deploying a new network from the beginning. And you are exploring the opportunities how you can migrate the existing customer to the 5G SA. So it was like an approach deploying the 5G in 2 steps. This is one of the major challenge, and I hope the industry will not repeat the same with 6G. Although I don't see the 6G will be mainly from RAN evolution if you're talking about the capacity, because I think we hit the maximum capacity of the channels unless additional spectrum. And yesterday we were discussing in the ITU-CXO meeting regarding additional spectrum, especially in the 6 gigahertz, to support the vision of the 5G in the future, especially up to 2030. So this is what I can summarize in terms of the lesson learned from the 5G deployment.
Brilliant, thank you. Bob, a moment of crystal gazing or crystal ball gazing, please. What's the next big thing, and how do we ready ourselves for that?
Well, the truth is, I don't think anyone knows what the next big thing is, right? So there was a great quote I read that said, if you want to know what's coming in the future, read science fiction. And if it seems remotely possible, you're reading the wrong stuff. So the reality is innovation and the next big thing could come from anywhere. It could come from the cloud, network technology innovation, other industries. It'll probably come from all directions. So the key thing is to be ready for whatever comes and whatever opportunities are out there. So from my perspective, that requires investments in 3 different areas. Happily, we're already seeing investment in the region in the first area, which is transforming and adopting open systems. So cloud native, OSS, BSS, leveraging analytics, putting in place the capabilities to leverage the data that service provider has. That's the first area of investment that will allow them to be ready for whatever comes next. The second area of investment is really, and it's been mentioned many times here already, is investing in the ecosystem. Being able to innovate is not something that a service provider or any company is going to be able to do by itself. So having the right partners in place and having the right capabilities in place in terms of onboarding those partners, creating the right business models with those partners becomes absolutely critical. The third investment area, and I'll go back to what my CEO said this morning, is it comes down to people and creating the right mindset around innovation and being able to identify those opportunities. I love Salim's tagline from Do this morning about go digital or go home. Creating the right internal culture around innovation will allow the organization to be ready for whatever comes next and be able to rapidly adapt to that and rapidly change and pivot to create new value for their customers. And that's equally as important as the technology.
Brilliant, thank you. And on that positive note, we've come to the end of our panel, so thank you from me. It's been an incredibly informative session and something that I've enjoyed tremendously. I'd like to invite you to any closing comments, maybe starting with Baha, and Robin, I'll circle back to you at the end, if that's okay.
Thank you very much again. I think what we're witnessing is a new era, right? And we're looking at the meta worlds, we're looking at the 4IR, we're looking at the smart cities, the 5G advancement, and the data. So there's going to be a sheer amount of data. We're talking about the zettabytes that was referred to earlier. And I think that puts a lot of pressure on the telcos to ensure that we have the right connectivity, the right availability, the right solutions around it to make it happen. And we've got the strength. We know that we have the know-how. We've been transforming all throughout since the 60s and 70s and the 80s and so forth. And hence, and we also have the customer base on top of it. And for us, we need to bring in the right partnership, the right development on board, the right governance, and the government framework is required in order to have the right policies for us to really drive towards, the correct path. But on top of this is, since we're also talking about the cloud, it's the right partnership with the hyperscalers is important from going from being competition into more of a collaboration model.
Brilliant, thank you. Dr. Ayman?
So today I think we are in a very, we are heading towards a very important milestone, especially with migration towards native cloud. As we started like 5 years back towards cloudification, now we are moving towards native cloud, moving our IT and telco workload towards native cloud, introduction of the 5G SA on top of this. So we have a fully native network that can, with microservices, you can customize a lot of new use cases. You can expose your network through APIs, standard APIs to third party to develop use cases. You will not stick only with the specific use cases. So exposing your network through APIs to a third party, so you can start developing and customizing a new use cases, okay? Extending the network from the main data center to the edge, adapting ORAN, so we can open the ecosystem for plenty of partners that they can compete, decoupling with the ORAN, decoupling the hardware, the cloud layer from the software, and accordingly you open it similar to the cloud story, and then innovation again will happen, AI and machine learning. So I believe we have, in the next 3 to 4 years, we are embarking on a great journey, continuing our cloud transformation, introducing of the 5G SA, additional use cases and monetization, and the collaboration with the hyperscaler is the key for us because they have a lot of tools, a lot of capabilities that we cannot replicate in our private cloud, for example, such as the AI, chatbot, using the capability, especially on the edge with a private network. This is where we are heading.
Great, thank you. Miguel?
Yeah, I'll take the opportunity to send a message to AWS and to the technology partners. I think, as Baha was mentioning earlier, telcos are becoming techcos. Okay, so we are a big customer of hyperscalers, but there's a huge opportunity in working together to transform all the industries around us. Combining technology is the key to providing these type of solutions. And I think that it's something which happens normally. Every vendor sees us as a big customer, and it's very difficult to differentiate when we are a customer from when we are a partner. But honestly, I believe that as a customer, there's so much that we can do. As a partner, its possibilities are unlimited. So I think that the new flavor of the telcos in general is something that can be really transformational, and I definitely invite AWS and all our technology partners to work with us to create this ecosystem that will unlock a lot of opportunities.
Absolutely, thank you. Karim?
Yeah, well, I think Miguel put it very well. The reality is what's happening, and as Bob mentioned, what is driving everything is more or less the vision of what is possible, right? And the combination of connectivity, 5G, combined with the cloud really opens up a lot of those scenarios. And as Bob said, we cannot really predict what it would take us, but I can tell you a lot of the science fiction scenarios are available today. And I'd like to give you a very, very simple scenario, which prior to joining ZainTech, I didn't even know it was an actual reality. And it is enabled by cloud and connectivity, 5G. So look today at IoT and drones, okay? We are at Leap in Saudi Arabia in February, we are going to showcase autonomous drones that are enabled by 5G to completely work and support first responders, whether they're addressing fires, emergencies, what have you, and completely run without a pilot, provide their whatever payload is supposed to do, come back, change batteries, and continue doing this work all autonomously, because this is all based on the technology that's enabled by 5G, but also having the intelligence that is backed by the cloud. So it's leveraging machine vision, all of the sensory data that it's getting being processed in real time and providing that response that directly supports even in saving lives. So this is the direction that we see the industry going, but as everybody's saying, we can't really predict it. Our role as telcos, along with technology, is to enable this platform to help accelerate innovation.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. I look forward to seeing that. Bob.
So at Netcracker, we have the privilege of working with many providers in the region on their transformation programs. Vodafone Oman, Du, Etisalat, Zain. And I think there's even more opportunity to accelerate adoption of the cloud as part of those transformations. So I think we look at what we're doing globally around the world with other service providers, and we think we can bring those learnings here to the region. So I think for us, the message and the opportunity is there, and we're here as an enabler and a supporter for those service providers to take that journey.
Awesome. Thank you. Saeed.
Yes, I think I cannot end the session without commenting on the 5G. My thought that I think the industry has some leap of faith, and I can remember from Moore's law where it says that the transistors will double every 2 years, and the people at that time thinking, why do we need all this so much processing power? But it seems that as the more processing you have, the more industry was finding a way to utilize this and actually wanting more. So I think with the 5G, as the speed increase, there will be always somebody who find use cases, new use cases for this. It would be interesting how things turn up. And I find also the metaverse session was very interesting, as was the lady mentioning about one use case. Probably we'll have many.
Many more, yeah. Robin, 30 seconds before we invite Bernard back up.
I will end it at this. The hardest problems in my career I've seen require the strongest leadership. And I have seen that many first-of-a-kind solutions that are developed in the telecom industry working together in a partnership spirit. Whether it was working with Bob's team in T-Mobile Netherlands, where we were trying to migrate an entire BSS system at a velocity of light, or it was working with the NTT team in Japan to save 70% in terms of energy cost, working with Dish to power up 7,000 sites this year, working with Du to transform the mobile private networks. And I think there is a lot of opportunity to do several firsts coming out of this region, and we look forward to that partnership and the opportunity of working together. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bernard?
So thank you very much for the panelists. Thank you, Prabashni,
Pleasure.
for moderating this. I think looking at everybody who's very hungry and already left the room for lunch, we have stretched the time. I think messages are clear. It's about partnership. It's about regulation. It's about cooperation. And then making use of the cloud benefits, which is the elasticity, speed, agility, innovation. That's how we will be able to cooperate together and move into this unpredictable future of innovation, which we don't know yet how it will happen. But as long as we are the ones who can make it happen, I think it's in good hands. Thank you very much.